few days ago, Nick Kiniski, the son of wrestling world champion Gene Kiniski, claimed that he had been sexually propositioned by the executive Terry Garvin back in the 1980s in the WWF. So he adds to an already fairly long list. It feels like, of people that with similar claims. I'm just reading here from SEScoops.com that Nick Kiniski, son of wrestling world champion Jim Kiniski, has claimed he was propositioned by Terry Garvin during his days competing for the WWF. The younger Kiniski competed for the World Wrestling Federation from 1986 to 1987. Outside of the promotion, he also wrestled for WCCW and the AWA. His sole championship accomplishment came in Texas All-Star Wrestling, where he held the tag team titles with Paul Diamond. So what he had said, though, his claim, and he said this in an interview with Terry Garvin, was that so he says he would come up to me and hit on me. I won't say what he said, but he said, "Hey Nick, let me perform oral sex on you. You can read a Playboy, and you'll have it made for life." And you know, he is my boss. He controls my boss. This is my livelihood. What I want to do. He said he tried to joke with him. He said, "Hey Terry, you know, I'm not that way, but if I ever change, you'll be the first. I'll let you be the first." And they kind of laughed it off. But it didn't stop there, though. So he said, but he was always coming up and joking. And one time he came to my hotel room late at night, and I told him to leave. Knocked at the door, so it put me in a very awkward position, you know. And it goes on. So he approached Vince McMahon about this. He said, "Hey Vince, I don't think this is right. Terry's hitting on me. I don't appreciate that, and I would like it to stop." And Vince said, "Oh, okay, I'll deal with it." And that was it. But then he said nothing changed, and that Garvin would continue to pester him about his proposition. And then shortly after, Kiniski would be pulled from matches, meaning he wasn't earning. Yeah, if you weren't working on the show that night, you didn't earn. That's what it was back then. I believe this was in response to not giving in to Garvin. Kiniski challenged McMahon on the matter. I said, "This isn't right, Vince. I complain, and now you guys are punishing me. I'll finish my bookings, but I'm not putting any guys over." So he's playing hardball here. And he says, "Put me in the ring, we'll see what happens. I'm done. I'll finish my matches." And Vince just went, "Nope, you're done now. Thank you very much." And some would say that that's very much Vince, that you're not going to do that with Vince, the owner of the company. You're not telling him what to do. He's not going to tolerate that from anybody. So that sounds like Vince McMahon, all right for you. And then it says here, Kiniski wasn't the first man to allege that Garvin was inappropriate. Yeah, because you had Barry Orton there, brother of Bob Orton Jr., and uncle to Randy Orton. And again, it adds to another list of people. And then so the Garvin, and they say that it was well known about Garvin being a homosexual. I think it was more kind of somewhat more of a secret with Pat Patterson. I guess he was never fully public about it, but everybody knew that Terry Garvin was gay. And again, this is not like a gay thing. I'm not homophobic, but it's just calling out the guys, the people who are predators. Doesn't matter if you're heterosexual or homosexual. But with this stuff with Kiniski, I was watching the Storytime with Dutch Mantell podcast earlier that James does. James is the co-host with Dutch. And some of the comments from Dutch, even though I could understand where he was coming from, and I understand Dutch Mantell, you know, a 74-year-old man is very much of his time, I get that. But some of his comments I thought were a little bit, I must say, tone deaf on this matter. And I don't think Dutch fully understands the whole, or maybe just, you know, in the end, Dutch Mantell wasn't there, and he was just going by, you know, he was asked the question and then he gave his opinion on it. So it wasn't like, I don't believe on this one Dutch did all his research on this, you know, and he didn't even know the name. He's like, well, who? Kiniski. But with this, some of the comments that Dutch had, I was a little bit, nah, I'm not sure about that. And to be clear, like, I like watching these guys, their podcast. I think it's great value. I enjoy it. I watch a lot of their clips that they do. But this take from Dutch, I was like, no, I'm not on board with that. And it is kind of that old mentality that, you know, like, I could understand if that's the head that you would have had on your shoulders back then. But now in 2023, I don't quite get that. I think, like, it doesn't matter whether you're, 20, 30, 70. We all should have probably evolved somewhat on our views on certain things like this. And obviously, when it comes to sexual harassment in the workplace, that is pretty darn serious. And with Dutch, and I remember watching I think it was an episode of last week that they did, and Dutch, he was just saying, well, basically, I didn't care about it when all this stuff went on at the time, even though he knew that it was a thing, this stuff, that, that it was common in the locker rooms, but he didn't care, it didn't personally affect him, and he didn't care. And I understand that, because we all got to look out for number one in this world, but then at the same time, if we all had that mentality, all the stuff that has gone on, we're talking the whole bloody shit, it goes, it extends to Hollywood, Me Too, Weinstein. If we didn't have that mindset, society today, we could have stopped this shit way much sooner than going back from Me Too movement in, late 2017. But what I'll do then, I'll play the clip that they're with them talking on this about the Gene Kiniski sexual harassment claim. So here we go.
Okay, so here's Nick Kiniski's quotes from post-wrestling. So this is the first time he's ever said this publicly and allowed it to be published, but he has told other wrestling journalists over the years this story, but then just said, that was for you, don't ever post this. So anyway, Terry Garvin, here's the quote.
Now that is, wait a minute, that is like a stupid statement.
What?
You're telling a reporter, don't report this, but...
No, but no one did. No one ever did.
Yeah, but if you're saying it, I don't know, go ahead.
Oh, well, there you go. Anyway, so this is to post-wrestling. Terry Garvin would come up to me and hit on me. I want to say... I'm sorry, I haven't got my glasses on. I'm actually going to put them on for this. The lights got darker. I won't say what he said, but you'll understand the meaning behind it. He says, hey, Nick, let me perform oral sex on you. You can read a Playboy, and you'll have it made for life. So it's like... Anyway. And he's my boss. He controls my boss. This is my livelihood, what I want to do. I kind of joked with him. I said, hey, Terry, I'm not that way, but if I ever change, you'll be the first. I'll let you be the first. We just kind of laughed it off. But he was always kind of coming up and joking, and one time he came to my hotel room late at night, and I told him to leave. Knocked at the door, so it put me in a very awkward position. There's no doubt about it. Hey, if you let me do this, you'll have it made financially for life. I mean, there's no other way to take that. I remember where it was. It was in Milwaukee, Oregon. We wrestled in Portland. I called Vince and I said, hey, Vince.
Wait a minute. Was it in Milwaukee, Oregon, or was it in Portland?
It says Milwaukee, Oregon. So, and then, anyway, Portland comes into it as well. I called Vince and I said, hey, Vince, I don't think this is right. Terry's hitting on me. I don't appreciate that, and I would like it to stop. And Vince said, oh, okay, I'll deal with it. And that was it. I talked to Vince and said, this isn't right, Vince. I complained, and now you guys are punishing me. I'll finish my bookings. He's been jobbed out by this point. I mean, he was only really in the company for like 9 months. But I'm not putting any guys over. Put me in the ring. We'll see what happens. Vince knows I could take care of myself, so he said no. I said, I'm done. I said, I'll finish my matches, and then Vince said, nope, you're done now. Thank you very much. So Vince fired him that night. So this says one of two things. Terry Garvin...
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Vince knew, because he's been told more than one time, and there's a pattern with Terry Garvin saying, do this thing for me, or let me do this thing to you, and I'll make sure that you're career-wise, well compensated.
Vince could have done that even if he had allowed it. Terry Garvin's not the boss. Vince is. So what if he had gone? What if he had say he laid there, he was looking at Playboy, it was getting done, and then Vince calls him the next day and finishes him up. He says, "Well, we don't need you anymore." So
true. But Garvin could have put in a good word.
That's his story. I don't really buy that. It could have happened. More likely, who gives a crap anyway? So. I don't know.
Well, do you know what it is? Is that with the Terry Garvin thing, I mean, I believe that Terry Garvin, because quite a few people have come out and said this. I think Barry Orton said this once when he was a young man, before WWF. the bit that's sort of difficult to quantify one way or another is if he didn't go through with it, that Terry Garvin, well, one of two things, Terry Garvin would have either halted a push he was getting, or he could have made his career. So it's like, is it an idle threat? Is it an idle promise?
No, it's an idle threat. That's what it is. Listen, the guy's name was what, Nick?
Kiniski.
I don't think you're going to draw sellouts with that kid, period. He may have been an all right looking kid. He may have been okay to Mr. Garvin, but I don't think you could draw flies with the guy. I really don't. So if he'd have complained, Vince is running a multi-million-dollar business. He don't have time to listen to this kid who's in first matches, second matches. He means zilch to the overall product. And probably he made the right deal. Whether the guy had said, I'm not putting anybody over, or I'm not doing any job, he don't care. He was done with him anyway. And in Nick's defense, not Nick's, in Vince's defense in this, I don't blame him. Just get rid of it because there's
So this is the bit where he loses me a little bit. When he says in Vince's defense, because let's put everything into perspective here with all the allegations, everything, with the NDAs and all the women that Vince has paid off over the years, the Rita Chatterton situation, all of that. Defecating on a woman's head, okay, allegedly, but, come on, it doesn't look good. As soon as you start saying in Vince's defense, it's like you've kind of lost me there. You're going to go in Vince's defense in defense of somebody who's, could have, potentially sexually assaulted multiple women. That's where the part where you lose me. Like, I understand where he's coming from, yes, but I mean, a couple of things. Number one, what he's saying, well, it's Vince's company. Terry Garvin wouldn't have made the decision for him to get the big push. Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, these guys are smart in the business. Everybody's a worker. And even like with a guy like Vince McMahon, people can work Vince. And I'm sure Terry Garvin could have worked Vince to give this Kiniski kid more of a push at the time if there was something going on there. Now, is it possible that even if something did happen there sexually, with Kiniski or with the Garvin, and it happened, and then the Garvin just kicked him to the curb, could have that been a thing? Could have that gone down? Yes, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're sexual harassment. Let's face it, it's no laughing matter. And again, if it's Dutch with the mindset of how it was back in the 1980s, I understand that. But at the same time, though, Vince is saying, "Okay, I'll deal with it," but then they're saying he's jobbing out or he's not even working, and I'll get to that stuff, because there might be a little bit more clarity to that, maybe with that, but so I think Dutch is kind of off the mark with this, on it. And I can understand, like, the whole thing, well, the guy's complaining again to Vince about, losing, and that comes off like a boy who cried wolf thing. But then at the same time, when Vince said, okay, I'll deal with it, be a man of your word then, deal with it. But then he didn't deal with it. Could he have had a word with the Garvin guy? Sure. And he still cracked on, didn't listen to him. But, Vince is one of the most ruthless, intimidating, scary people you'd ever meet. So surely Vince could have, if he wanted to, had a word with him, had a word about it to Garvin, and he never would have done anything, never would have bothered Kiniski again. But I'll carry on with the clip.
There's 1,000 guys you could put in the first match. He could probably walk out in the crowd and find some independent wrestler to put in there. Maybe did a better job. So I think Kiniski, is that his name, Kiniski? Yeah, I just think he just needed something to say, so he said that.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was basically a body, during his WWF run, and then, not that it was much of a run, he was basically prelim talent, and then he was just doing jobs for the most part in the second half of what turned out to be a 9-month or 10-month run or whatever it was in the WWF.
And what years were these?
86, 87.
They weren't making any money anyway.
Yeah, the Prelim guys wouldn't have been making any money.
I don't think the main event guys were making any money then.
What, 86? You must be kidding. This is Hulkamania time. This is the coining.
Well, yeah, but it's according to the shows they put you on.
Well, okay. If
You
you're on
could
the
be on
C
those
show,
second. If you on that C show, you're down there with whoever.
Nick Kiniski.
You're down there with him and Terry Garvin. So of course Terry was bored. He wanted to do something. So, but yeah, I've seen the main event guys when I was there. It was way down. Huck wasn't there. It was, and
no guaranteed
some
pay.
guys told me they've never made less money, and I'm thinking, well, you've never been to Memphis. You can make less money there, but
right. So there we go there. And again, I understand where these guys are coming from, and I'm not like this part of this outrage woke mob about this, but I still think that Dutch Mantell is a little bit off the mark with that. I mean, he's saying, "Oh, I think the guy just wanted something to say." Well, I mean, what in your mind, Dutch? What are you trying to say, that he's just jumping on the bandwagon? Like, this probably didn't happen, or it's not as bad as he makes out in the interview. I don't know, man. I don't know. I was a little bit unsure about what he was saying there, and the whole thing about this Kiniski guy. Well, first off, right, he's the son of Gene Kiniski, and I've heard that name before, so he must have had a bit of a name back then, and I'm sure Dutch Mantell must have heard of Gene Kiniski. You know, so I don't know if, like, he's playing dumb and he didn't know that Kiniski name, or if he had some heat with the dad, Gene. I don't know. But, you know, Nick Kiniski, if you look at him there, you think, well, yeah, he was like 26 at the time, all right looking guy, would have had potential, had something there. And, you know, what James was saying, and he might be a little off with his wrestling history. I mean, James, you know, I don't think James was even born when Nick Kiniski was in the WWF. Same with myself. But looking at his background, and not everything's accurate always on Wikipedia, but it says here that Kiniski wrestled a few times for the WWF at their frequent Madison Square Garden shows, as well as the Boston Gardens, including wins over the Brooklyn Brawler, Frenchie Martin, Jimmy Jack Funk, Les Thornton, late 86 or late 87. They said here he was featured on WWF's television show at least once, including a very competitive match against the IC champ at the time, Randy Savage, and he only narrowly lost. So to me, what I would say, my theory here is that they had high hopes for him. Vince liked him, and maybe, you know, he had Garvin that was not just liked his work, his ring work, but it was attracted to him. And maybe they decided, well, Garvin was in Vince's ear, oh, push this kid, give him some wins. So he's winning on TV, his confidence is up, he's feeling good. And then, you know, you have him go up against Randy Savage, it's a competitive match. You know, it's not like he's getting squashed in a minute or two. So he's probably feeling quite good about himself, about his career in WWF. And at that point, you could maybe say maybe there was potential grooming at that point. And then maybe around the time when he's at that level, when he's, you know, going in a toe-to-toe in a competitive match with Savage, you know, Savage was just about to face Steamboat at the time at Mania. And he already had a name in the business. Savage could make someone look like shit if he wanted, right? So maybe what happened then around that time, there was a proposition by Garvin. And then he rejected it, he flat rejected it, then he started getting buddied. Maybe that's just a possibility. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I do think like Dutch Mantell was a little bit off the mark with that. And I don't think I'm blowing out of proportion. But as soon as you start saying in Vince's defense, I mean, I used to be a big Vince McMahon guy at one point as well, but I struggled to say in Vince's defense about anything now with all the allegations that, you know, they don't look good. You know that almost all, or probably all, that could be true. And yeah, I believe this guy, you know. And there was maybe a bit of a weird thing about him saying about he had spoke about this to reporters, but then didn't, I guess, told reporters not to report it. I mean, I don't know if that strictly would be. That sounds a little bit weird. I mean, Mantell was saying that's a bit of a weird statement, and yeah, it is a bit weird. My only thing would be is that he spoke to reporters and asked to be anonymous. Would be my thing on that. That's what I think. Maybe that's what he meant. But I think the thing is, like, a lot of the probably, like, I don't know if you call them like the old guard in wrestling now, but they would have had a different mindset at the time, that they knew it went on, and it was just one of those things. It was just not like it was accepted, but people were just aware of it. But everybody was just keeping themselves to themselves, like, hey, whatever these guys do, Patterson, Garvin, not my business, it's their business. Yeah, I get that. But then I suppose it's that thing, until something affects you like that, and then it would fully hit you, like, oh shit, this isn't right. This isn't normal behavior in the workplace. And if, it's one thing if these guys are doing it and, Vince isn't aware of it, but then if Vince had no problem with it, accepted it, never condemned it, then that is fucked up. He is an enabler, really, McMahon. And I could never defend him and go in Vince's defense on anything, really, now. He was best friends with Pat Patterson. I mean, come on, there was a reason that's why Pat Patterson went back, and maybe he could kick Mel Phillips and cut Terry Garvin to the side, and maybe they got paid quite well in the end to just go away. But I mean, come on, you can't tell me Vince didn't know what was going on, and he had an idea. And I think the whole thing of, like, when Vince saying, okay, I'll deal with it reminds me of the whole thing, and they touched on this on Young Rock. When anytime a wrestler is kind of complaining and going to a promoter, hey, you need to use me more, I've got the new idea, you need to give me a bit of a push, and the promoter says, I'll think about it. And I'll think about it means you never think of it again. So when Vince says, okay, I'll deal with it, that's probably the complete polar opposite, and he will not deal with it. And in fact, the shit you're involved that you're in, it'll just get deeper and deeper. And to me, that's my theory on it. Probably Kiniski, there was something there for him. He was in their plans, but then it could have just been Garvin, had a thing for him, and then he was in Vince's ear, because again, in wrestling, everybody's a worker. It's that carny roots. It's long before, Vince McMahon and the glory, WWF days. But yeah, that's my take on that. That's my thoughts on that. Not everybody might fully agree with this, where I'm coming from, but let me know, guys, what you think. Leave a comment. Feel free to hit the subscribe button. But that's me for now. So thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. Bye.